Welcome to Uncle's Channel, thanks for watching today, and we finally made it to the last game in the Mega Man Game Boy series, Mega Man 5, and holy cow, what a wait it's been, because this game here is a completely unique Mega Man game. No more recycling bosses, or levels, or enemies, or anything like that. Mega Man 5 does everything from the ground up. All new enemies, all new bosses, all new soundtrack, all new levels. We even got a new assistant. We don't have Beat anymore, the little bird that flies around. We have a cat named Tango. I mean, holy cow. How many years have we wanted a cat in a Mega Man game? We finally got it in Mega Man 5. This is a truly a pinnacle of the Mega Man gaming series in a lot of different ways. And we're going to break down all of that throughout the video today. But let's go ahead and get into Mega Man 5 for the Game Boy. Now, when I start these reviews off, I do like to look at the box art first. And so as we look at the box art here, this is a wonderful box art for Mega Man 5 because it really represents the game well, as well as having a pretty cool looking picture. So Mega Man here, he's standing on a planet here in outer space with a lot of the robot masters around him, and of course, you know, just a cool galaxy scene. And that really represents the game extraordinarily well because this entire game takes place in outer space, and every one of the robot masters or star droids is based on different planets. And so really good representation of the atmosphere. As far as Mega Man himself goes, a cool little stance here. He's got his new little Mega Buster called the Mega Arm that he's getting ready to shoot off there. And we'll get more into that in the game, but that's a brand new weapon he has. We got Rush in the background because Rush is our background assistant in this game. And we have Tango right up front, that little assistant cat that I was talking about. Love that. We got some of the robot masters surrounding, like I said, and you can see the one off to the right there. That's Saturn, hence the rings, infringing on Ring Man's territory a little bit. But all of the robot masters or the star droids are based upon different planets. So we have, like Mercury and Saturn and Jupiter and Venus and Pluto, and well, I guess technically Pluto's not a planet anymore, but it was when they did this game, so Pluto's part of it. The only planet they didn't really seem to represent is our planet, so not really sure what's going on there, I guess because all the other Mega Man games have taken place here, so that's why I didn't do it. But regardless, great cover for Mega Man 5. So when you load the game up, you actually get a very well developed backstory, very similar to how Mega Man 4 was, but a much more developed story than Mega Man 4. So you have Mega Man just, chilling on a nice Sunday afternoon here, strolling around, not even got his Mega Man costume on, just simply the robot boy that he is. And a new enemy, not Dr. Wily, a new enemy, Terra, comes down, crashes into the planet here, and Mega Man, doing a little Clark Kent Superman thing here, transforms himself into the Blue Bomber, and him and Terra get into it. But his little Mega Buster does nothing against him. So Terra, at that point, basically sort of blasts Mega Man back, and Mega Man knows that he's in trouble, retreats back to Dr. Light's headquarters, and Dr. Light says your Mega Buster is of no use and gives him the new Mega Arm, which is what we saw in the cover earlier, and it's going to be our new weapon throughout the game. So while that's going on, Terra's bringing down his star droids down to our planet, and of course Mega Man is going to have to defeat all of them and Terra in order to save the universe once again. And enough good really can't be said about this intro because it gives us a fantastic backstory, more unique than most of the Mega Man games, more developed than most of the Mega Man games, especially the Game Boy ones, and a great song carrying on through the soundtrack in the background here. And the whole game has a unique soundtrack, and most of the songs are all very well done. There's only one or two that I really just don't like, but most of them are pretty top tier Mega Man songs. So when you start the game up itself, you get a little bit of a recap here, and Dr. Light's giving you your Mega Arm, your new weapon, introduces your new assistant, Tango. I mean, like I said, I'm so glad we finally got an assistant cat. I mean, it's a missed opportunity that Mega Man's never done like a cat man throughout the games as an enemy, and maybe the reason for that is because we had this awesome assistant cat in Mega Man 5 that I just never knew about. But regardless, Dr. Light gives you your new assistant, he gives you your new weapon, and he also opens back up his store again so you can use your P-chips that you collect throughout the levels to buy some upgrades. And the upgrades in this game are way better than they were in Mega Man 4. I mean, you still have like the E-Tank and the extra lives and the little miniature E-Tanks and all that, but you actually have two unique items in this game that focus on your new Mega Arm here. And so one of them is when you shoot your Mega Arm out, it actually stays on the enemy and continues to grab them or punch them for extra damage, which is a really cool move to have. And the other one is like a grab move as far as like picking up items. So you can shoot your weapon out and it'll grab the items through like, behind walls or just far away and drag them back to Mega Man. And both of those are like super helpful, but they're also really expensive. So you won't be able to afford those until like halfway through the game. But when you finally get them, it's quite a nice surprise. In the next screen it loads up, you get to select your Robot Master or your Star Droid to battle against, and sort of like in Mega Man 4, they actually mixed this up a little bit. Instead of doing the traditional Brady Bunch, squares, where you get to select your Robot Master, they've done like all the other Mega Man games, and even the X games, and all of them pretty much. You actually have a unique little square here off to the side that shows you the entire galaxy, and you get to pick which Star Droid you want to go battle against. This one's not as cool as it was in Mega Man 4. Mega Man 4 had sort of the best stage select screen, in my opinion, but this one is still really good. And especially when you select your Robot Master or Star Droid you want to go against, the little animation scene for that is excellent, and I love that. Now, the first stage I selected is Mercury, and I love what they did with the character here, because Mercury is obviously like a liquid metal, and he can melt himself down and travel across the screen and reappear on the other side. So it took the idea of the heat of the planet of Mercury, the element of Mercury, and created basically a liquid metal man for Mega Man. And I always loved Liquid Metal Man in the Terminator movie, and so the idea that he's like basically in a Mega Man game now, amazing. Now, obviously, when you first get into the stage, you're going to want to try out your new Mega Buster here, or your Mega Arm, and so you charge it up, you shoot out there, and you're going to notice it doesn't go all the way across the screen. It goes almost all the way, but doesn't go all the way, and then it retracts back to you. And this is actually a really cool feature, because you can hurt enemies on the retraction part of it as well, and it's going to have the same amount of power as if it hit them with the fully charged blast. And so it's actually a strategy you can use throughout the game, and it's unique to this game, and I really like that. Now, as you travel throughout Mercury stage, you're going to notice it's pretty difficult, but it has some very unique enemies in it, because all the enemies in this game are completely unique for this game alone. And you're going to have the first enemy here is going to be sort of like a Dustman enemy reject, kind of shoots out space debris, sort of looks like what Dustman would shoot out a little bit. You also have some pretty cool ones as far as like when you destroy this little robot, its little wheel blade continues to come at you as an after effect. You also have these little digging robots. I mean, there's some really cool enemies in this stage, but it also has pretty much the same Mega Man platforming action, like most of them do, as far as like setting up a ultimate reward over here, and it's a trap to obviously get to it, where you're almost certainly going to die. I mean, it's just like a Mega Man trope at this point, and a Mega Man game can't be a Mega Man game without offering you an ultimate reward, but the ultimate punishment to get that reward if it doesn't work out. I mean, it wouldn't be a Mega Man game if it didn't have stuff like that in it. Now, eventually you're going to get to Mercury himself, and holy cow, this is an amazing fight in a Mega Man game. It's probably one of the best boss battles in any of the Game Boy Mega Man games. And I say that because you're literally getting to fight against Liquid Metal Man here, because he's able to melt himself down, travel across the screen in one of two different ways, and of course he reforms himself and tries to attack you. And of course it's easy to slide underneath his little metal forms here, jump over them, but the boss battle itself is just a ton of fun. Watching the visuals, knowing that you're so capable of defeating him, and it's just a super fun boss battle. And I wouldn't have a Liquid Metal Man fight any other way. Now, when you do defeat him, you get a little bit of a different animation screen here than some of the other games, and you also get a display of how to use that weapon, and that was in Mega Man 4 as well, so that's a good carryover from 4 to 5. But I can't help but be a little bit disappointed that Liquid Metal Man's weapon is not going to be to melt yourself down and travel across the screen. It just simply is a firing weapon. And how cool would it have been if they'd worked that mechanic into the game? Like there's a little slide area or a little area Mega Man can't fit through, and you can melt yourself down and travel across to the other side. That would have been an awesome aspect of the game, and to me, a really missed opportunity. But regardless, Mercury stage, a good challenge, Mercury Man himself, a great boss fight. Mega Man 5's off to a great start. Next up is Neptune stage, and just keeping up with mythology, obviously Neptune stage is going to be more water-based here, and so you start the stage off on top of a giant robot submarine, and it's a good little intro there. Now, as you journey throughout the stage, you're going to once again notice that the enemies are completely unique. There's a little worm fish here, pretty cool looking, and some more Dustman looking rejects over here. But overall, you're not going to see any of the little, little yellow Tonka looking characters that lift their hat up and shoot little balls out at you, because you're not fighting against Dr. Wily in this game. You're fighting against Terra. But while the enemies are pretty cool in this level, the main takeaway from this level is actually the interactive environment. They introduced this in Mega Man 4 a little bit on the Game Boy. It's really going to come to fruition in Mega Man 7 and later on in the series, but you can actually manipulate the environment. You can shoot the different pipes and they burst open and water comes at you, and of course that creates a little bit of a hazard, so it's actually best if you didn't bust the pipes, but it's really hard not to when you're sort of blasting away at enemies. But also the environment here, when you bust a pipe, it actually shoots a little bit of water out at you, and it's all going to be to your disadvantage, but you're going to want to see those things in the game, and I love that the game actually has sort of environmental hazards that you create yourself, and it just makes the level a little bit more interesting. Now when you get to Neptune, he's once again a pretty easy boss to go against, as long as you use your Mega Buster, which is pretty much the story for every boss in this game. The unique attacks really don't matter a whole lot against boss battles. They're all pretty weak against your Mega Buster. Just use your Mega Buster and sort of blast away, and you'll probably have defeated first time. All these enemies, or all these bosses in this game, are pretty ridiculously easy, and probably the easiest in all of the Game Boy series. Up next is the Mars stage, and the Mars stage is a little bit different than some of the other ones because while the other stages actually had like unique enemies for that stage, the Mars stage feels like it took enemies from the prior Mega Man games and just sort of did a reskin or a little bit of alternate design for them and stuck them in this particular level. Because look at these creatures right here. These totally look like they are just sort of an alternate design for the little vacuum cleaner grasshoppers from Top Man stage. Or these monkeys here, they're acting the exact same way they did in Mega Man 3. Or take a look at these turtles here. They look unique enough, but then look at the rolling animation, just like the little turtle needle creatures in the Needle Man stage. It really does feel like they just sort of took some of the creatures from the other Mega Man games, reskinned them, and put them into this particular level. Now, I'm not saying that's a bad thing, because they're still unique to this game, but I think I can see the source material. However, when you get to the mini-boss here, there's a great mini-boss fight, because you have these little platforms that are coming up, and you have to jump from one to the other to continue to get to the height in order to just simply shoot the bad guy, but also he shoots out these missiles that you have to avoid at the same time. It's not super hard, but it's just challenging enough and just unique enough to be one of the more fun boss battles or mini-boss battles in the Mega Man Game Boy series. Now when you get to Mars himself, he's not a crazy difficult boss, still a cool looking boss. All the bosses are well designed in this game as far as like sprites. But if you just simply stand in one spot and you just simply shoot him constantly, you'll shoot through most of his smaller missiles and you can just simply stand there, continue firing, and you'll have him defeated first time. He won't shoot you fast enough or faster than you can shoot him, and you'll have him defeated without really ever moving. Now take everything I said about the Mars level, sort of rehashing some enemies from the older Mega Man games, just sort of throw it out the window because the Venus level is completely unique in every single way. The enemies in this level are some of the best in the entire game. You have this little crab here, it shoots little bubbles at you, you get stuck in the bubble and it sort of travels you along a little pipeline toward going into a hole or on the spikes. You have to bust the bubble open and then attack the crab. It reminds me of that final level in Snow Brothers where these giant statues put you in a bubble and sort of send you up to your death on spikes up above. It reminds me a lot of that, but I really enjoy this enemy. Then you also have this little owl creature here that can sort of blow you towards spikes or pull you towards spikes. And I just love the way this owl looks. It also houses little smaller birds on its head. A great enemy and a great addition to the game. And then you have these little bubble blobs that are on the ceiling here. And of course, the difficult thing about them is they camouflage themselves with other bubbles on the ceiling. So you never know which ones are going to drop down and try to attack you. And it actually allows for more of a slower pace in this level to try to make sure you're taking the appropriate precautions before one drops down and tries to kill you. And also these bubbles play into another effect because you can actually bounce on them and they're on the bottom part. And you have to use the bounce effect to try to bounce on certain platforms. And that's a mechanic that's reused in a later Mega Man game. I can't think of which one it is. It's either 7, 8, or 11. I'm not sure. It's almost like a balloon stage. But you can bounce on it. It's very similar to that. And sometimes the bouncing is a little bit hard to get down pat. And if you mess up, it's pretty much immediately dying. But it's still a cool mechanic inside the game. And it's also in this level, you finally get to use your cat for a guaranteed victory here. And it's not against the final boss or anything like that, but if you go for this alternate item up here, which is definitely worth your time to go for, you can't get down to continue your path anymore because there's an enemy down there. But if you just simply call out Tango, Tango comes down, takes out the enemy, bounces around a little bit to take him out, but eventually does it, and then you can continue on your path. So it's almost like they worked in an area of the game where Tango, if you didn't want to get hit anyway, is required in order to advance. And I really like that. Now eventually you get to Venus, and Venus has some of the best sprite action in the game. I love the little strut that Venus has going across the screen. All of the enemies in this game, or all the bosses anyway, they have great sprites as far as like very vivid or very detailed. And they have great sprite animations, more so than any of the other Mega Man games on Game Boy. And Venus, not a difficult enemy, actually one of the more easy ones as well, because he simply shoots out these little bubbles. And as long as you just simply make sure to get hit by the smaller bubbles, you're sort of invincible, and you just simply use your Mega Buster, you know, Venus taken out pretty quickly. Still a fun boss battle, not super difficult, but that tends to be the ongoing trend inside this game. Now after you've defeated these 4 Robot Masters, the game likes to trick you and make you think you're done with the game. But all the Mega Man games have done this so far, so we sort of know the drill by this point. But you get a little middle stage here, and you think you're going to fight against Terra, but actually you're going to fight against a creature called Dark Moon, which Dark Moon should look really familiar to pretty much any Mega Man fan, because he's pretty much the Yellow Devil here. And he just sort of dissolves himself and moves the pieces from one side of the screen to the other, and you have to avoid that and then hit his eyeball when it opens up. And I'll admit, when he first appeared, I was sort of like, no, not again, because I never liked this creature. I always had a really tough time with him in the other games. It always takes me a heck of a lot of tries to finally be able to beat him, but this one's actually really easy compared to ones in the NES games, because if you just simply stand way off to the side of which, or the opposite side of he's on, all the little bouncy pieces will completely avoid you, and you simply have to jump over or slide under the bottom pieces. Really simple, really easy, and then just do a charge up, hit him in the eye, and then just repeat the step all over again. Once I figured out you couldn't be hit on the far side except for the bottom 2 pieces, it was a really easy battle. And of course, after you defeat him, you get a little cutscene here of Dr. Light, and I just love Dr. Light's reactions because he's so emotional in the things he's saying or thinking about. Or like when he's here, he's thinking about how he's going to modify Rush to be a Rush jet in order to send you off to fight the next 4 robot bosses in the galaxy. And I just love his thoughtfulness or his contemplative look here. It's just an entertaining little thing. But when he does create Rush Jet in order to fly you to the other part of the galaxy, Look at the design here. Isn't that the Rush Marine from the other games? And maybe I'm just missing out on that, or has this been the Rush Jet in some of the other games? I'm not sure, but it seems a little fishy, at least in my memory, because it looks a lot like Rush Marine flying through outer space. And then your next 4 Robot Masters appear here, and of course I go with Saturn first, and Saturn really feels like a Ringman Part 2. Because if you remember back, Ringman, he looked very similar, had the rings and whatnot, but also his entire level was focused on outer space and Saturn and such as that. And so this really does feel like Ringman Part 2. But the level is actually a really good level because you got different stations here that have like half gravity or 2 times gravity, and some of the gravity puzzles throughout the level. It's an enjoyable level. When you finally do get to Saturn, you're in for probably a big shock because this boss is actually fairly difficult. The Sprite is huge and he's an awesome looking boss and has some cool animations to go along with that. But he's just difficult to avoid and his attacks are pretty powerful throughout the entire battle. But I did figure out if you stand directly in the center of the screen here, a lot of his attacks will avoid you and you can sort of bait him into doing certain moves which are a little bit easier or to your advantage to win. And even with the Mega Buster, I think you'll take you a few tries, but I think you'll still beat him with nowhere near as much difficulty as some of the past Mega Man games. Now when you do defeat him, you do get Rush Jet, which is weird because I thought what we had earlier was Rush Jet, but maybe that was like Rush Spaceship / Marine Rush. I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure the thought process was really thought out on some of that. Next up is the Jupiter stage, and this stage seems to focus on its theme a little bit more consistently than some of the other ones because it focuses on electricity a lot. Now how that aligns with the planet Jupiter, I have no idea, but the electricity theme does run throughout the stage and even down to the final boss there. But of course you have these little electric men throughout the stage, and I do love the way the electric men look here. You know, they're all electrified and they shoot their little beam out at you. It's a very common enemy mechanic in Mega Man to be invincible and then fire their bullet off and then you can finally shoot them. But it's a unique little animation take that's really not done in any of the other games. The level itself sort of focuses on being outside and inside when it comes to being in outer space. Because if you're outside, very low gravity, sort of ice platforms because it's so cold. Come inside, no ice platforms, and of course normal gravity. And it's sort of a cool mechanic to go back and forth between the two inside the level. But I will say the enemies in this level, they are a little bit more challenging than some of the other ones. And when you do get to Jupiter, he does tend to be one of the more fun bosses in the game, and I've said that multiple times in this review, which just sort of tells me that the bosses in the game are really fun as an overall. But he flies across the top of the screen for almost the entire battle, and he'll shoot down his little lightning bolt, which you just stand off to the side, super easy to avoid that. And then if you just simply go underneath him, he shoots out little balls, and if you're underneath him, you'll avoid that. And then if you just slide off to the side, you'll avoid him swooping down, and then you just shoot him one time, and then the same pattern continues to repeat. And he's actually a really fun boss battle. I like boss battles where you can learn their mechanic, sort of like the Mercury boss battle, or even go back to some of the older games like Toadman and such as that. I just love games where you can figure out the mechanic and you can pretty much win the boss battle without getting hit because you know exactly what's going to happen, and you just sort of feel good about yourself when you defeat a boss like this. Next up is the Uranus level, and this level has some really cool stuff in it. First off, you start with these conveyor belts, which is pretty ordinary for a lot of Mega Man games, but then you get these cool little walruses. Like, how they make sense in this level, I don't know, but I mean, it just seems like they just sort of took all the enemies and just sort of randomly threw them in some of these levels. And then you get this really cool mini boss. It's like a giant sphinx, and I love the way it looks. And of course, when you defeat it, its eyes sort of crack out, and I mean, it's just a really cool looking little mini boss battle here. And I like the mechanics of it as well as trying to jump up on the rocks in order to shoot him, but rocks are coming down. It's amazing that the mini bosses in this game are as quality as they are, because they've had 4 games already before it, and it seems like they saved them all up for the best mini bosses in this game. You also have the little owl here, the little owl nest on top, and once again, I just enjoy this enemy. He's a fun fella. Also, you notice in this level again, something I meant to mention earlier, is this game has alternate paths to take, but I've not been able to actually access any of them because I don't have the correct mechanics or correct boss moves in order to lift blocks or break blocks yet. And I tried very hard to get into some of these areas. I just simply couldn't do it. And later on, I did realize the final 2 Robot Masters that I defeat give me those 2 moves, and I can go back and replay some of the levels if I want. And I get these little jewels or these little crystals, and they'll make it where I get an item that allows me to consume less of my special moves. But I'm using the special moves so little in this game, there really wasn't a whole lot of motivation for me to go back and get it unless I simply wanted to do a completionist run. And I might go back and do that at some point, but for this particular run, I just continue going through the robot bosses. When you get to Uranus, you're going to discover once again a really easy boss fight. If you just simply stand in one place with your Mega Buster and blast away, you have him defeated. But it's also got these cool little rock walls that come down, and obviously I'm starting to realize during the fight this is the boss I need to defeat in order to access some of these alternate paths. I wish I'd played against him sooner, but once again, the special item I don't really necessarily need. But overall, an easy boss fight with a pretty cool looking mechanic. Now the last robot master I've chosen to go against is Pluto, and I guess I just sort of assumed Pluto would be like a dog, probably because I'm so used to like Disney, but Pluto's actually more based upon a cat, and that's a really cool take there. Now as you travel through the stage, you're going to notice that this stage is very reminiscent of Gutsman's stage, as far as like the construction around it, as far as like the blocks around it. It just really looks a great deal like it, and almost makes me think that the boss for Uranus should have been the boss for this stage because of all the rocks and almost sort of acting a little bit more like Gutsman for like picking up rocks and throwing them. It almost makes me feel like they should have swapped the bosses here or put them in different areas. But regardless, the stage is pretty cool. You actually get a callback as far as Proto Man shows back up, and he's not really appeared a lot in the Game Boy games, but he's just simply a helper here, and he just sort of tosses an item out to you, and you get to continue on your journey. It's a pretty fun little stage. Now, when you do get to Pluto, he's once again one of the harder robot bosses. I'd say him and Saturn are the two hardest. Probably Pluto's a little bit harder. It's just hard to get to him. He just sort of bounces around so much. His electric moves actually made me think he would fit better in the Jupiter stage. But regardless, this is where he's at, and he is a tougher enemy, and I did end up having to use some of my special weapons in order to defeat him. But he's a tough one. But now you're finally at the part where you've defeated all 8 of the robot masters, and you're ready to fight against Terra. And spoiler alert, Terra's a really easy boss as well. If you just sort of stay on him with your Mega Buster, you'll have him defeated in no time. It's almost like they really just made a point to water the bosses down in this game as far as like difficulty wise. I know I said Pluto was hard and Saturn were hard, but 6 of the 8 bosses were super easy. Terra is super easy, and when you do defeat Terra, you get sort of a Gemini Man looking weapon here. I know it's kind of like Star Chaser, and it actually focuses more on going toward the enemies, where Gemini Man's weapon just sort of bounced around the stage. But it's really similar looking weapon here. Now when you do defeat Terry, you do find out that Dr. Wily is behind this all along, which I actually had a small inclination about that before he actually revealed himself. And I never played the game, I didn't have any spoilers or anything like that, because it was in Pluto stage. There was one enemy that it really did look a lot like one of those little Tonka fellas I was talking about earlier, which is always a Dr. Wily enemy. And I thought to myself, that's weird, he's the only enemy in this entire game here that looks like Dr. Wily. Maybe Dr. Wily's got something to do with this. And sure enough, bam, when you defeat Terra, here comes Dr. Wily. Now when of course, Dr. Wily appears and he's getting ready to take off, he runs off to his little space station. You get a very unique level here. You get like a space shooter level of Mega Man in your little Rush Marine jet, I'm going to call it. And you actually go through and fight the asteroids or fight the enemies amongst the asteroid field. And I had an embarrassingly hard time with this level. I shouldn't have, but it just really was difficult for me to avoid all of the asteroids and fight against these enemies. I just had a tough time. But when you get to the end of the area, you actually shrink down, and I love the little pixelated look here, and you actually get to fight against Dr. Wily's like massive spaceship. And it's not too hard of a boss battle, but it's just a lot of fun, and I love the way it looks, and it's just a really cool battle. And then once you finish him off, or once you destroy the little laser in the middle, you get to journey inside the space station, and now you're heading into the Wily levels. And then the game does something that I absolutely adore, because they knew this was the last game in the Mega Man series, and they wanted to just sort of wrap it all up in a nice little package here. And so they actually took the, I guess the pre-final boss to Dr. Wily in all the games, and you get to go through all of those again. You get to go through Ender, Punk, Quint, as well as Belade, and you have to fight through them, and they are way easier in this version, and I guess that's because you have the more powerful Mega Arm that Dr. Light prepared for you at the beginning of the game. But they're way easier, but I just love that the game knew it was the last one in the series, and they did a callback to all 4 of the other games to sort of show you how far you've come. And I really like it when games do that, and I was hoping that they were only going to do that and not make you fight all of the normal robot bosses again, because they sort of got rid of that in one of the games. And my hopes were dashed, because immediately after this you go into a little stage, and sure enough, there are all the robot bosses again for you to go through. And I guess it's just sort of a Mega Man assumption that this is going to happen in every game. I just don't like this mechanic, and I understand that it's in every Mega Man game and I just need to sort of get over it, but I've never liked fighting all the robot bosses again. However, it was easiest in this game because so many of these robot bosses didn't even require a special weapon. You could just pretty much sort of use your Mega Buster on all of them, and you can pretty much take all 8 of them out without ever dying. Really simple. Now after you defeat them, of course you get one final visit from Proto Man, which is sort of like your final farewell. It's like, here's Dr. Wily, here's all the items that you need, best of luck. And you head on in there, and the first two bosses for Dr. Wily, they're both focused on essentially like Super Smash Brothers, I guess you could say, because you got the Master Hand coming down, and they basically just try to sort of squish you, and they can actually try to grab you and things like that. The two stages are different, but they're very similar in the fact that you're just simply fighting against this giant hand. Now the third stage is actually really cool because you actually have these little missiles that are coming out from Dr. Wily's little robot boss here. And then of course you just simply avoid the missiles. Then you go into this anti-gravity chamber and you have to destroy this little robot here. And you go back down to the bottom, and then he shoots out a bomb at you, and you won't ever actually shoot Dr. Wily's robot. You have to shoot the bomb, and it transfers or pushes itself over to Dr. Wily. When it explodes, that's how you hurt him. And you just simply have to do this little pattern over and over and over, and it's a unique little boss battle, and I actually like it quite a bit. Now in the fourth stage of Dr. Wily, I mean, there's a lot of stages. They really wanted to blow it out with this one. But it's actually sort of a, I guess sort of a tight area here. You have to jump up in order to shoot him with your Mega Buster, and there's probably other weapons you could use as well, and avoid the attacks as they're coming. But I thought it was going to be a lot harder than it was because there's spikes on the ceiling, and I thought if I hit the spikes, I'm certainly going to die. But it turns out the spikes just do damage to you, so you can actually sort of relax a little bit as you're going through the battle. Not too bad. Overall, Dr. Wily, stage 3 was the best of the 4 stages, but once you do defeat Dr. Wily, he called out his secret enemy, Sunstar. Sunstar comes down, and you think that he's going to just attack you, but then he destroys Dr. Wily, and his whole mission here is to destroy anything that's like a threat to him or to his power, and then of course he goes after Mega Man. And the boss battle, once again, is not super hard, but it's actually a lot of fun because you actually fall down through these different platforms as you're fighting the battle. Use your Mega Buster, use E-Tanks if you need them, and he's not too bad, but it is a fun battle. And when you finally defeat him at the end, he realizes he's critically endangered, and Mega Man, showing his humanity, I guess, if he's a little bit of a human inside that robot, he tries to rescue Sunstar and say, hey, we can make this work and we can save you. And Sunstar's like, no, I'm critically injured. I'm getting ready to blow up according to my programming. And with that, Mega Man's able to flee and escape from the spaceship before it blows up. And of course, I was hoping maybe you get to like play through the escape scene because it seemed like this game would probably do the escape scene correct, where some of the other games did not quite do them as well as I had hoped. But I was really hoping to get to play through that. But regardless, that's the last bit of the gameplay in the game. There's going to be cutscenes from here on out. So Mega Man, of course, flees from the spaceship, makes it out, and then you get the final ending here, which is Mega Man back at peace again, and the credits begin to roll. Now, toward the end of the credit, Dr. Wily does make his appearance again, and he runs off, and Mega Man begins to chase him, which I guess shows that Dr. Wily has survived after all this. If they want to do a Mega Man 6 on the Game Boy, they easily could. They never did. This is the close of it, and I sort of wish they just ended it with Dr. Wily, dying in the explosion, but that's probably a little bit too dark for a Mega Man game. And so maybe they should have just made it where Dr. Wily was imprisoned at the end, but I would have liked to have a genuine conclusion for the game instead of just sort of leaving it open. Because I know they're never going to do another Mega Man portable game, and so this is the final one we're going to get. And of course, this game closes off with a galaxy scene, and this actually makes a lot of sense. All the other Mega Man games, except for one on the Game Boy, ended with a galaxy scene, and I always complained, I was like, this doesn't make any sense. The game didn't take place in the galaxy. This one took place in the galaxy, so a galaxy scene makes complete sense for this game. And I like that they sort of kept in tune with the older games on the Game Boy and did one that actually also made sense at the same time. A nice little bookend to the overall game. But as a whole, this game was absolutely fantastic. I enjoyed going through it more than the other ones, simply because it was a completely unique and new adventure. I didn't know the boss mechanics. I didn't know what any of the things in the levels were going to do. Everything was brand new to me in this game. The soundtrack, excellent soundtrack, all new songs. There were so many things I loved about the game. But there were also a few things that I think were a little rushed in the programming. I did mention a little bit earlier in the review. I feel like a lot of the enemies in the game, they just sort of designed a bunch of enemies and they sort of threw them in the game at random spots. They didn't necessarily go with the levels. And I can also say the same thing about some of the bosses. Some of the bosses feel like they designed the bosses and you sort of threw them in the game because it didn't seem to align with the levels very well. Like I said, Uranus definitely fit better with Pluto's level, and Pluto definitely felt better with Jupiter's level. And I'm sure there's more examples throughout the game, but those are the one that was most blaring to me. But it just sort of felt like they designed some really awesome stuff and they just didn't quite put it in the right puzzle pieces as they were programming the game. But did that take a lot away from the game? I would argue it doesn't really take a lot away from it because a lot of the levels are so focused on the outer space theme that these bosses and enemies were somewhat interchangeable as a whole, but I do think they were probably mixed up at some point in the programming. That's just my thoughts. Let me know if you agree in the comments down below. But if you could only play one Mega Man game on the Game Boy, I'd probably say this is the one to go for, because this is going to be one that's a completely unique experience, and you're not going to feel like it's revamping on any of the other aspects of the series. And it's got some awesome features in it, like the P-Chip store, the power-up system, the unique little arm cannon that shoots out, and you can attack enemies or grab items and such. There's so much cool stuff in this game, and if you only get to play one Mega Man game on the Game Boy, or you only want to invest your time in one Mega Man game, to me, this is the one to go for. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel, check out my other videos listed up above, and as always, go out there, find a great game to play, and just simply have a great rest of the day.